Okay. So, hi again, everyone. Chhaya sir, I don't think requires any introduction because we also have just so many people who've registered for this, over 400 people. So I think dedicating this to all of them, but also to Harshal Parekh, I just like to share a picture. Can you see what I've shared?
Yes, yes, wonderful.
Yes. So this is Harshal Parekh, who is a graduate from CEPT University. He's chosen to work with children and to bring about a change in their lives through his design. He's a student of CEPT and Professor Chhaya, so I'd like to dedicate this session especially to him.
Wonderful.
To kind of get this session started, I'd like to invite Soundarya, who's a student of architecture. She has interned with Professor Chhaya and also with Doshi sir, and she's a singer, she's a dancer, she's many things. So if you could have Soundarya share about her experiences and also sing a Tyagaraja Kirtane, which I've heard you're very fond of. Soundarya?
Hello. Second. क्षीरसागर विहारा अपरिमित घोर पाठक विदारा क्रूर जल कण विदुरा निगम संचार सुंदर शरीरा क्षीर सागर विहारा अपरिमित घोर पाठक विदारा क्रूर जन कण विदुरा निगम संचार सुंदर शरीर सतमता हित विभंगा श्री राम समन रिपु सनुतांगा श्रित मानवांतरंगा जनक जा श्रृंगार जलज बृंदा क्षीर सागर विहारा राजाधिराज वेशा श्रीराम रमणीय कर सुभूषा राजनुत ललित बाचा श्री त्यागरा जादि भक्त घोषा क्षीर सागर विहारा. So that was a Utsava Sampradaya Kriti by Sri Tyagaraja, set in Ananda Bhairavi Raga and Jampatala. From the many things I learned in Chaya's office, one thing that will always stay close to my heart and remind me every day in anything I do, in everything I see, and everything I learn is that to be open to learn, to be observant to everything that happens around us and within us. And this is because of a session that happened, I think, on like one of those days during my last week in the office. And it was when we were talking about music and architecture. And so was saying that Riyaz is living life in architecture. We have to notice the things around us. We have to pay attention to the details and the things that make what architecture is. Giving attention to those things and learning from life itself. So I understood that architecture is not just a profession but a way of living. So thank you, sir. Looking forward to learning so much more from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Soundarya. Chhaya sir, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Meera and Soundarya, and also Harshil, and Kaushik, and Cuckoo children as a whole. I'm very pleased that I'm able to be part of your conversations today. And as Soundarya said, I'm an architect, and everything that I talk about somehow gravitates back to it. So even though I had not been given any topic to talk about, I thought I would link up our experiences in recent times with the making of architecture. And if there are people in the audience who are not architects, they can translate the word architecture to whatever field they are in. Because what I'm going to talk about is of a fairly uh, elemental, fundamental nature and is in itself quite simple. Um, and it should be possible to think about um, any field in relation to the kind of things that I'm going to talk about. In the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we've been imprisoned in our homes. A small, tiny virus went across the world and made humanity scared. Humanity, which considered itself the master of its own destiny, which considered that it had now got enough knowledge to control nature, was suddenly slipping on this banana skin that came up, and which suddenly created new conditions for humanity to take into consideration. We're not used to being in tiny spaces. We like to roam around. We like to move quite a lot. And of late, we've been moving in a kind of frenzy, never at rest anywhere, continuously changing the place, often repetitively, monotonously, but all the same, moving and moving, moving very fast. As against this, now, in this time, we have had to be in one place, and that one place remains the same, and time moves slowly, and we who were used to continuous stimulation by different kinds of sensory excitements, now have the same environment, slow, unchanging, and many of us feel imprisoned, feel scared, feel frustrated, because we do not really have a feel for the slow and the detailed and the observation of the same thing for a long time with patience and with steadiness. That ability we have lost. We need diversions, we need distractions. And this is a time which has forced us to not have, physically at least, any of these. Therefore, some of us turned to the virtual world and started um, giving unthought and fast replies to all kinds of stimuli, and became even more frustrated in the unchangingness of things in spite of all that we did. Our sense of place, which was, which hovered between the global and the local, that geography has been shattered. Our geography has become the geography of a few square feet of space. And our history is shaken up because we used to think of dream about the future or have nightmares about the future or hold on to the past and create fixed identities with that. All that in this time is seems to be of little importance. That we have in front of us a time in which we do not know what will be the future. It does not seem to matter what was our past, and in every set we seem to be at sea in both space and time. So geography is shattered and history is shaken. How does this relate to architecture? We would we can think about it in the abstract, but yesterday a friend with whom I had designed a housing colony, a very large housing complex, 1600 apartments, probably a population of 5,000. And this friend, we were partners then, and, and we had designed this housing. And he asked me yesterday, how do you think the people in those apartments feel when they wake up in the morning? They have been in that place for 5 weeks, 6 weeks. So do they feel as if they are imprisoned, or do they feel not so bad? And he sharply pointed the question towards what architecture can do or cannot do. It is not, doesn't matter what we said about what they feel, but the fact that architecture could actually affect our very being, our state, our sense of self and our sense of society, that was something that was brought sharply home by this question. In contrast, afterwards, I thought about my grandmother. She was in her 90s when I knew her for longer periods of time. She lived, we had a small apartment, and she had a daily routine which covered not more than 6 or 8 square meters in any direction. That she could go out, sit under a tree, and be all afternoon sitting there doing nothing, perhaps reading something, perhaps telling a story, perhaps chopping some vegetables, but nothing of any great significance. And yet, she was at peace with the world. Often, she would say, the shade of the tree, it has reached that point. So now it is 4 o'clock. And her minute and continuous connectedness to the world in every aspect. When the color of the leaves changed, when the birds started flying in different ways, when the wind rose, when the sun started slanting slightly more, in each of these, her observation, her connected to the world was evidently something that nurtured her, something that gave a sense of meaning to her life. She could feel that she could change things. If the sun moved, she could change the location of the box on which she was sitting and move slightly more into the shade. This was her sense of agency. She could do what she wanted to do, what she needed to do. Nothing very big. She couldn't transform the world. She couldn't change anything big, but she could, in her own world, she could make the changes that she wanted or needed to make. Her senses then, therefore, needed to be fully open. And the feeling of being able to do something gave meaning to the sense of life. And underneath it all, there must have been the rhythms of her heartbeat, the rhythms of the day, the rhythms of the seasons, the cycle of life, her own history as a living creature, all accepted as a rhythm which exists, not a rhythm which she would like to control, not a rhythm that she would like to either speed up or slow down, but a rhythm which exists, and in accepting that, in being aware of the real then, was the meaningfulness of life. So our sense of the world, that the world makes sense to us, is connected to both what is happening within our bodies as well as around us. So can architecture help us to make sense of the world? That is the question I would like to ask. Can architecture help us to make sense of the world? And I believe it can only do so if it is capable, if it continually puts us in touch with the real. The real is not some huge abstract thing. The real is the everyday, the ground on which we walk, the rising of the sun, the sound of somebody talking in the next room, the argument that we have with our mother. That is the real. The real is the everyday. The real is the ordinary. But the ordinary doesn't mean unimportant. Because the ordinary is full of wonder. If I think about my argument with my mother, that the fact that we have a relationship which has lasted and lasted in spite of all the arguments is a sense of wonder. If I think about the ground The fact that it is firm most of the time and I can walk on it, and sometimes it is soft and I have to be a little careful, isn't that a wonder? That the sun will rise from a certain direction and at night the stars will shine. Is that not wonder? So that the everyday is not something which is to be thought of as unimportant, but it is at the core of our existence. That the core of our existence is the sense of the ordinary, everyday qualities. But the real also makes us understand that we are frail creatures. As human beings, we can jump only a certain distance. We can pick something which is heavy but not very heavy. We can do things, but we are frail and we are subject. Just imagine the cyclone which is going to come to Bengal and Orissa tomorrow. In the face of that cyclone, this massively capable culture will not be able to do anything. That the frail creature, human, but it is his very frailty, her frailty, which makes the sense of the wonder alive. We are frail, but we have fortitude. We have the ability to stand firm. We have the ability to try and do something. We have the ability and small amount of agency to modify things. And we have hope. Now that hope is something which no other creature can have. I cannot imagine an ant hoping to find sugar. I cannot imagine a bird hoping to find some flower from which it can suck the nectar. They just do it. But we have hope. And our hope is not something in some known thing, but the hope is in the unknown. That we are able to say, maybe. That word maybe is something which is a powerful word in our language. So that we have the real makes us feel frail, but at the same time gives us the sense of saying yes, or perhaps, yes, possibly, maybe not. And so this is first thing, that if architecture can make us feel that we are part of the real and we are frail but capable, we are frail but possibly able to do something, then architecture will be able to connect us to the sense of the world. We have been making architecture so strong and so mechanically competent that we forget our frailty. And we think that come any weather, rain or shine, heat or cold, humans will be able to create insides which are completely constant. And in that they lose their skin. The human beings lose their skin, they lose their eyes, they lose their noses when they start wanting to have certainty over the kind of space that they make. So let's talk about place or space. What is it? How do we know where we are? How do we know what kind of time we are in? These are the questions which can make us feel really scared. We can make us feel lost. And can architecture help us to feel less lost? So in that, I think the first thing we have to understand is that there are thousands, millions of trajectories that are crisscrossing all over the world. I am a trajectory. As a child, I was something. As a teenager, I was something. As a young man, I was something. And now I am something. And tomorrow I'll be something else. And 5 years from now, I don't know. But it will. So it's a trajectory. And all of us are trajectories zipping across. What we zip across is the space. But we zip across, space comes into existence when trajectories intersect. Alone, there is no space. But when there is me and a tree, there is space. Me and another human, there is space. Me and a bench, there is space. So that the trajectories are not only the trajectories of humans, but the trajectories of the animal world, the trajectories of the plant world, the trajectories of the mineral world, the trajectories of all kinds of existences in this multifarious world, in which space allows the multiplicity to exist and time allows the multiplicities to intersect. And this creates a rhythm. There is a rhythm, a syncopation of trajectories. Syncopation means 2, 3, 5, 10 rhythms are overlaid on top of each other and are creating a complex rhythm, which is a very, very interesting, very, very enjoyable phenomenon. And it is the basis of architecture, I think, the basis of feeling, making sense of the world, is to be able to understand the rhythms of the world. What are the rhythms? From the largest, biggest, longest lasting to the smallest, we might go somewhat like this.
So I was talking about human frailty, and we got systems frailty also. So, yeah, so the last thing I was talking about was the intersection of trajectories and the rhythmic syncopation of many dimensions of time. There is the cosmic pulsation, there is the geologic pulsation. The world has been heaving up and down, sideways. Seas have formed where there was land, etc. So the geology is pulsing, so it looks static. There is evolutionary pulsation. There are species, they come in, they die out, and so on. There are pulsations of tiny forms of life, viruses, bacteria, insects, animals. So there is a pulsation of life. There is a pulsation of our own bodies. Then there is subatomic pulsation of electrons and quarks and all that sort of thing. All this forms a complex syncopation. And we as human beings, when we are in front of this, we get awed. We get even afraid. Sometimes standing on a hill on a dark night under the huge stars with the sea in the far distance, you feel scared almost. So there is a fear of the vastnesses and of the very, very tiny things. And in all this, we need to find our place. Where do we fit into this pulsation? And that is where architecture can come in and help us to inhabit such a complex, rhythmic existence of the world. So as space, architecture can help us to connect to the near and the far. I can sit in a room and looking at the grains of wood off the table, and I'm running my hand over it, feeling the grains, and I can hear the sound of a little cricket just outside, the near. So architecture can make my senses alive to the near, and to the far. I can look out through the window. I can stand on a terrace under this large sky. But I know that I'm on my terrace. And I know that that sky is there, and I am here, and I'm contained, or I'm helped by this architecture to inhabit, to bear, to enjoy this vastness. Similarly, for time, architecture can help us to bear the huge scales of time. So I build my wall with stone, and I know that that stone took millions of years to form. I have a wooden door, and the door is weathered. So the tree took 50 years, 100 years to grow. Then it took some time to make into a door. Then it was fitted. Then it was polished. And then it became worn with time. And now I can see the marks of age and the patina of time on it. So architecture can show the past as a slow moving thing. And architecture can show also the possible things of the future. That it is able to suggest that perhaps on this terrace tomorrow there may be a monkey jumping. On this terrace tomorrow, when the rain falls, I will see water going down. And I don't know whether it will or not. But the possibilities are opened up by the existence of architecture in that manner. I prevent myself from getting lost in endless space and endless time. How does this happen? How does architecture do this? So the first thing I think is my proportioning. I need to know, how big am I? How big is the world? What is my size in relation to the tree far away? How big is the sea? And I'm so small. So when I build a small cabin on the beach or near the beach, I am really making a statement or a kind of gesture of saying, yes, I know it's huge, but I have this little space. And in this space, to some extent, I feel secure. So how big am I? Where am I? Is told to us by things. Just imagine if a door handle was huge and you had to use both your arms to open the door, versus a door handle was tiny, microscopic, and you couldn't find it, then it doesn't make sense. But because it is a handle which fits my hand, or look at it the other way, that I have a hand which fits the handle, that way a thing is able to create a sense of proportion. Similarly, a room could create a sense of being long, of being stable and at rest, being oppressively small, being, and so on and on. And that proportion of the room will want me to either go out or sit there happily enjoying something, or being very tense and worked up by the proportions itself. Then buildings to the same, streets to the same, the cities to the same. So to make architecture to our scale is a question of proportioning. And our scale is given to us by our eyes, first of all by our bodily movement. That I can easily walk from here to there. That kitchen is not too far. That room is far away, and so on. So with my body, with my muscular movement, I sense scale and proportion. With my eyes, with my ears, with my nose, with my skin, all of these give me different notions of the sense of proportion. And altogether, that all helps me to create a place. I talked about my grandmother in the beginning, and she was creating this. She had herself, her clothes, her box on which she would sit, the tree under which there was shade, the floor on which she was, and together all this in the certain sense of proportion created the architecture for her being. And architecture helps by telling us or answering questions like, am I safely held? Am I free? Am I imprisoned? Am I cut off? Or am I connected to the world? It does this by delimiting, opening up, and connecting. So very simply speaking, floors, walls, roofs, windows, doors, they create the paraphernalia with which I delimit the space, not own the space. This idea of ownership is something different. On our site plan, we draw the property line, which is a very strange notion. Because when I'm sitting here in this place of mine, actually I own about 4,000 square yards of space. I mean, that's what I've paid for. And there's a boundary line and so on and so forth. But I actually own about a kilometer my eye can see. I own the whole sky. I own the wind that flows from hundreds of miles away. I own the sun as it falls, and I own the moon. And therefore, the sense of delimiting is not a sense of cutting off, but it is a sense of connecting. So, how you delimit? You make a prison by delimiting completely and without any ambiguity that you are inside. But you can be free by creating the sense of being held without the sense of being lost. So that is the art with which the architecture can help us to make sense of the world. Then it does something else. It amplifies, it makes visible the cycle of the day, the night, and the season. As I sit here, the shadows of some of the leaves of the trees are falling on a wall, and the shadows are moving slightly. And if I sit here for long enough, the shadows will move, and some other part of the tree will start casting shadow here. So that it tells me, now is evening. Now the sun is low in the sky, and it will go still lower. And so it amplifies. The wall is the vessel in which this sense of the day can come through. The roof and the terrace is that which bears the night sky, and so on. Like this, architecture is able to amplify and make visible and tell us, when is all this happening? Where is all this happening? And most importantly, it gives limited certainty. Really, architecture, if it gives too much certainty, then, as I said, it cuts off our senses. So, if I create, the ideal thing would be in this world where there's so much of, travail and such horrible weather and all kinds of things, best thing to do would be to make a cube of 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters made of steel, completely insulated, no sounds from outside. Maybe one of the walls could be glass so that I can look outside, but it should be air conditioned and it should remain constantly the same. No. Architecture cannot strive to create certainty. It must leave room for surprise and for the unexpected. It must leave room also for the rhythms of the expected, the day's rhythms, the season's rhythms. So all of this that architecture can do can help us to make sense of the world, sense of what we are in, then it is not a hopeless situation. But we often think about architecture as a kind of device, but it isn't. Making sense of the world is an action. I am involved. You are involved. Somebody else is involved. Maybe the dog who walks in every day also is involved. Maybe the monkeys who jump around are involved. Maybe the insects who want to come in and bite us are involved. All of that is what really is the action of the world which makes architecture, not the shell with which we try to fix reality. Reality is unfixable, and it is the beauty of reality is that it is unfixable. So we actively try to make sense of the world, constantly from moment to moment. Just now when the internet gave way, we tried to make sense and we found another way of talking to each other, and that sense continues. So we do not passively receive or consume sense. We cannot be given a video which says this is what the world is, and so now you understand you are in the world like this. It is not something to be consumed. It is something to be done. So therefore architecture cannot be a device or a toy. We tried to do that. We tried to make architecture a device for controlling reality, or a toy for indulging ourselves. And still we are doing that. But I think then we will have to ask the question, when this virus has told us so many things, should we think about controlling? Should we think about indulging? Or should we really connect and be connected? So, but then we are in a system, a world system, an economic system, a political system, a system which gives great value to ever greater consumption. Consume, consume, consume. So if you are not buying something, they'll make advertisements. They will spend more money on the advertisements than on the raw materials and the labor for making it. But they will make sure that you try to consume, or you continuously consume. For that, they also need to make the world so unpleasant that you need to divert yourself by consuming. So you will need lots and lots of diversions. You will need all kinds of accessories in order to keep your mind away from the fact that it's a horribly repetitive and monotonous system of which you have been made a part. And the other thing that is needed to do to keep consumption going is to devalue your own powers of action. You are powerless. But if you wear these clothes, you will become the most popular person. You are powerless. But if you use that perfume, you will become the most attractive person. And so if we are, and of course for that, we need to create huge collectivities, vast cities, millions of people, vast nations, and in which everybody feels lost. Nobody feels that they can do anything, and we create a disconnected hopelessness. So, if we don't pay attention to proportion, the proportionate delimiting, opening up, connecting, amplifying, and limited certainty, then we are going to fall and continue to fall into the abyss of disconnected hopelessness. We have now lost at present, and the coronavirus is an indicator of it, we have now lost our sense of scale. We wanted our cities to be larger and larger and larger. We want all the countryside to be free of humans, only crops of certain kinds, free of animals. Well, the countryside to become a kind of resource base and make ever larger cities, over-centralized, huge, too big to understand. That is one place where we need to rethink. We need to think, how do we bring back a sense of scale to our existence? How do we bring a sense, how do we overcome the sense of powerlessness that all of us feel? Powerlessness also because we became obsessed with control over things, control over nature, control over people. It is quite amazing that we are ready to give up our houses to robots. Alexa and Siri and so on can take over our houses. We used to move things around ourselves. We used to remember the time to switch on or switch off something. We used to have all the action was in our hands. And if I didn't feel like doing something, I didn't do it. But now Siri or Alexa will keep on pestering me till I do it. And so we are willing to give up our lives to robots. We are willing to give up our cities. We want to make smart cities in which the cities will run our lives, not our lives running the cities. In fact, I came across one quite horrible statement in an article I read recently. In fact, this is by an Indian entrepreneur in the US, and she says, humans are biohazards, machines are not. Can you imagine something worse than that? That you are a biohazard. You are a carrier of coronavirus, whereas the machine, the robot, is not a carrier of coronavirus. If we allow the world of that kind to come into being, what are we doing? So we are too focused on our dream or nightmare of the future or the past, but not intensely aware and active in the present. So, to again make sense of the world, we will have to turn away from unending and meaningless, stupid consumption. We will have to become active agents in the world, not passive consumers. First point. Second, we will have to turn away from control to response. Trying to control the world is one way. Trying to respond is to become a participant in the world process. And we will have to learn that we are participants rather than controllers. That hubris, that tremendous arrogance that we built up on our knowledge is something that we will have to hold loosely, hesitantly, and use it in a very wise way, knowledge. Then we will have to turn away from that unreal dream time, of the future. Oh, the future is going to be fantastic and we'll go to here and we'll do that and everybody will be able to go into space or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it happens or not. But to live there rather than to live in the now or to live in the past, which says, oh, we were like this, and it's a great civilization and therefore I call myself so and so. That too is a dream or a nightmare. But the present, and the present is formed when the seeds of an unknown past and the seeds of an possible future are both unknown and exist, but in this moment in which I have to act. So we will have to enjoy the adventure or play of uncertainty. All this will have to be action, first as humans, or creatures first, then humans, then as citizens, and only lastly as architects. I think we should not stop and think ourselves only as architects. We have to think of ourselves first as human beings, and through that comes the action which is proportionate action. Then, if we do that, then architecture can help us make sense of the world. It can harbor, it can show, it can make available the near and the far, the tiny and the vast. It can help us to remember and anticipate while being fully present. It can support the emergence of a tiny bit of harmony, constantly needing renewal. If you clean the floor and you have to do it every day, maybe twice or thrice if you live in Ahmedabad, that is a kind of renewal of the house. It doesn't happen forever. So no architecture should happen forever. It should happen and it should need renewal. And then we will be alive creatures and not the subjects of a system which is too big for us to understand. So we have to make small. We have to think of the near without forgetting the galaxies. We have to act on the nearby. We have to work with small things and yet be able to have the largest understanding. With that, I think I will leave it open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think there are quite a few questions that did come up.
Yes.
I'll just read them out.
Yes.
About the example you gave about grandma being at peace with her world because she didn't control the rhythms of life. How would this be in the case of a community or village where a lot of rhythms are common or connected? And so where does one's world end, or does it at all have any limitations or boundaries?
Okay. So should I answer that one or should I hear the other question?
This is one part of the question, so let me just read it in its entirety.
Yes.
And also in that scenario, a rhythm is not just existing, but isn't it responding to the various uses of various people? And so the rhythm exists according to a majority's preference, right? Isn't that a problem? How can we encourage the rest of the community to not misuse a rhythm or break it down even into trajectories?
Yeah. Okay. So I think very important question. And it's something that I wanted to cover, but I thought it would become very complicated. Not everybody is a householder. Some are adventurers. Some like to go out to sea on a little boat and don't feel awed by this vast sea, but enjoy the adventure of being out. So there are so many different ways in which each person, each trajectory connects to the world. And there are many ways in which that happens. And a society which allows these things to happen without becoming upset that it is not a uniform society is a good society. So you can think that we could have nomads, we could have pastoralists, we could have hunter-gatherers, we could have farmers, we could have all the kinds of ways of life that existed in the forest, small town, city kind of combination. What went wrong in that was the idea that some modes of life are higher, more noble. And the caste system did that, the economic system did that, and that is something which has to be resisted. But the diversity of human beings to find their own rhythms, which doesn't mean that there is a cacophony. If there is every time I go out here, I find the cattle people, the nomads taking their cattle along the road, and I have to slow down and I have to allow them to pass and so on. That's not a complex. That's not a problem. That is the coexistence of two completely different modes of life, and there could be so many others. And I think that those rhythms, all those rhythms, must be allowed to find their own expression. When you try to uniform, when you try to say, we are one culture, we are one, we are so and so, this is our identity, then we create the disjunction and we create the violences that we suffer from. And therefore, this my grandmother, for example, was a person who had lived her life in all kinds of places. But at that point in time in her life, she adopted the slow mode. But she had earlier adopted fairly fast modes, 5 children, and taking care of them, bringing them up. So it does not mean that forever also the same trajectory will remain in the same rhythm. So the rhythms will change. How do we create the sense of a space in architecture which is able to contain more than one rhythm? That is the real challenge. I hope I have answered that question somewhat.
Yes. The next question is, so you were speaking about the human agency, to have hope and also to empathize, which is as much inward looking as it is about, extending it externally, in a sense that almost morphs distance as such. So similarly, time is also constantly stretched or pushed together by the way that we see history, the past as the present. And in that, there seems to be like a really fine line, or maybe even a disappearing line between going back to the roots of a system and progress in the conventional sense. And so it feels like we're constantly walking on a tightrope without really finding a balance. Can you speak a little bit about that?
First of all, I'd like to say that in order to talk of progress, you have to keep on continuously looking backwards. That I was only so and so, now I have become so. And feel satisfied with that progress, or feel unhappy with that lack of progress. So that looking backwards is something which is a tendency of our mind, but with alertness, with agility, we can look at what is actually the state right now. And progress is a meaningless term, really. How can you say that the art of the caves, say at Bhimbetka or at Lascaux, was worse than the art that we make today? It wasn't. Both reached heights of expressiveness. Similarly, there were ways of organizing family. There were ways of creating relations between parents and children. There were ways of creating gender roles, which were often as good or sometimes better than what we have now. There were economic systems which were better or as good as what we have now. So the idea of progress is something which is a 19th century imposition by the colonials to make everybody else feel that they had not progressed. That culture of the colonial culture, the colonist was far more advanced, and it was the duty of the colonized to try and reach that state. If we get out of that mindset, then we can be free to explore what is on the cards today. Yeah.
Learning all over the globe is getting systemized, where we're losing the intangible qualities that learning once had. And in that context, what do you think the role of institutions of learning are, and is it important to adapt or adopt indigenous systems of learning as well, especially this time?
So I think institutions tend to make, they give names to different skills and different abilities. And they narrow down the human being if possible. I mean, I'm talking about not the few very good institutions, but by and large, the whole purpose of creating manpower, of creating profession-ready practitioners. To create that kind of thing has been the goal. You will even find it written in their motto and their mission statements, to create profession-ready practitioners or something like that. And this, I think, has nothing to do with education. It is like a factory process in which you say the goal of this factory is to produce chocolate. And therefore we will take cocoa and we will mix it in a certain way and we will do this. And out will come chocolate and we can brand it and we can sell it. And so the branding of the chocolate and the making of the chocolate, well, it doesn't matter too much how you make it as long as you can brand it properly. And so education has gone into a really terrible mode. So that learning will have to keep on happening. Taking a pragmatic view, it might be that you need to have a certain qualification to practice. All right, go and get it. But keep learning, keep asking, keep probing, keep going to places and finding out, keep not believing. And the first rule of any learning process is to say, yes, I would like to understand more. And after I understand, maybe I will agree with you, maybe I will not agree with you. And that, I think, is at the root of all learning. So we have to make a distinction between learning and education in institutions. The more institutionalized they are, the more are they away from the question of learning. Originally, the word institution meant something else. The word institution meant the sense of a goal, the sense of a possibility, the sense of something which could be pursued. Institution did not mean buildings, regulations, do's and don'ts, degrees, and so on. So, for example, my wife and I have entered the institution of marriage. We hardly ever think about the rules and regulations of marriage, but it is something which has given a stability to our relationship without any pressure of any kind. Now that is an institution. The institution of motherhood is an institution. The institution of brotherliness is an institution, but not the institution often of the family, which is sometimes an oppressive mode of trying to control people. So I think one has to go to the origins of the idea of learning and the origins of the idea of institution in order to find what we should be making now.
You spoke about a sense of scale and space as being between multiple organisms or forms. So how do we then design for a scale that we're not immediately able to comprehend, especially larger scales? And how do we sensitively understand beyond a scale that is beyond our own scale as individuals?
What do you do when you go to a metro station and take the train, you have a crowd of unknown people. And you find a way of holding yourself, entering, and creating a space which is then able to take the long journey. Or how do you walk around in a city? You don't know the whole city. You don't know where the next lane will go to. And yet, you walk, you can ask someone, you can look for telltale signs, you can find ways of reading the city. So, in the same way, when we are making a small building in a huge city, if we start thinking about the whole city and what's happening, say if I'm talking about Mumbai and I say what is happening in Borivali and what is happening in, and so on, then I will get very confused. I will have to look, one, at the very near. I will have to look what is next door, what is just outside, what is about within walking distance from here, what is the amount of sound that can carry. Will the smell from that fish shop disturb me, and so on. And I will have to take that very near into account. On the other hand, I will have to take patterns of the very large. For example, it rains every monsoon for about 2.5 months, and this is the amount of water that comes. By and large, that is the pattern, though it could be different every year. So I look at patterns, and then I try to keep scope for some degree of error in what I'm doing. So I might think that, oh, okay, the rainfall is so much, so if I calculate so much, then flooding should not happen beyond this. This is the highest flood level of 100 years that has happened, etc., etc. Then I have to take a call on it as to whether I should keep to that level or whether I should find some way of dealing with the water or whether I should go higher than that level. And in that, there are a whole lot of factors which relate to your own building and which relate to the city as a whole. Similarly, when we are talking about the country, we are talking about small towns, we are talking about villages, we are talking about cities, then the distribution of groups of people will have patterns from which I can start understanding something, as long as I don't make it into a completely abstract numerical formula. But I will have to understand patterns as something which gives me a sense of it. For example, a group of people of about maybe 10, 15 people can know each other very well. Maybe 100 people can know each other by maybe name, basic surname and something like that. Maybe 300 people can know that we are all living in the same neighborhood by face recognition. And beyond that, it is difficult to know. So therefore, when we think about human groups, we have to think in terms of some plausible ways in which we will create scales which relate to the way in which, by and large, we have understood the whole of this to happen. And we will still often go wrong. Therefore, we will work in an accretive manner. We will try something, and if it doesn't work perfectly, we'll change it a little bit, or we'll come up with something else, and we will not do everything all at one go in one huge action. Therefore, then you have the scope to understand that the making of architecture is a way of understanding the city or the context. As much as it is a response to the context, it is also a gradual experiment in understanding. It's a learning process. The architecture making is a learning process. And this is something which I think is often misunderstood. And you say, well, you have to give the drawings and they have to construct it and then that's that. But it isn't really like that. and it is a different kind of process that we have to bring into action.
Okay. Storytelling has been an integral part of human civilization, and architecture and storytelling are such integrated parameters. Do you think architecture would cease to exist without the art of storytelling?
No, it's not something of ceasing to exist. Every work of architecture is a story also. It started somehow, it went through some problems, it became something else, then it tried to return back, and just as complex as a human story is a building story. And the whole of existence is story-like. So whether architecture, we can't have anything. Even if you want to write accounts, you still need to have a story. The story of making profit or the story of balancing the books or something. And there will be a story. So you cannot have something where you don't have a story. Because we connect what happened earlier, what happened next, and then perhaps what might happen. And the surprise came and something else happened. And that we keep on working with in every aspect of our lives, not just in architecture. And that I think is, so to say that story is the basis, it's fine. Of course it's so. And there is no need to become really that you start writing a written story first before you start making an architectural plan. No, you don't have to do that. You might, it's okay. But the story is in the making itself. My first line, the second line, the way I rubbed it out, the way I overdrew it with a heavier pen. Then I again tore up that sheet of paper and then I took another sheet of paper. And like that, a story gradually developing inside me and on the paper. And that is an exciting phenomenon.
So you things evolve. In this, where does the sense of ownership of, say, the architect saying this is my design or it's my aesthetic, does it really come into play, or when does it truly become something that belongs to everyone?
You know, yesterday I had some hair which fell off when I combed my hair. So where is my ownership? Huh? So constantly, the world is coming into being and passing away. And the way we make things, yesterday I made some dal which turned out to be pretty good. So will I say that now I am the master of dal? Huh? Will I put my brand name on it? Will I own that recipe? Should I own that recipe? Or if it goes into your hands and it will become slightly different, is that wrong? Is that something which you violated my recipe? So I think this question of ownership is a commercial question. It's not a question of being human. You don't own anything. In case you're going to die away after a few years. So you're not going to take away anything. Huh? So you will not own anything. But you will enjoy making it. And maybe you will make a living out of it. Okay, that's all right. That you get. And you get maybe a little bit of credit and people admire you for having done something. That also is fine. But you don't own anything. And so, when I respond, my response will be different from your response. Something peculiarly of my way of doing will come in when I do it, and peculiarly your way of doing will come in when you do it. Both will be responding. And yet both will have different results. So if you want to say that we own those results, fine enough. But I think it's a small matter. It's really the smallness and meanness of human egos which results in the sense that I must own it.
I'm a student of architecture, and most often, even at a very mundane level and not at a philosophical level, I realize I don't know what I don't know. How does a student living a robotic life like me try and know what I don't
Sorry,
know at all?
can you say the last sentence again?
How does
How
a
do you?
student living a robotic life like me try and know what I don't know at all?
Not to live a robotic life, that's all. Go out and try some new dishes. Go out and jump up and down. Go and try to do swim. Travel to the nearest village which needs some work to be done. Or go and help people who are walking on the road trying to reach home. Do that. And you will come out of your roboticness. But I think that this is something which doesn't even need huge dramatic actions like that. You can, first of all, the mundane, what we call the mundane, is the most fascinating thing. Never think of anything as mundane. I think that is, what is mundane? 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. What a mundane thing. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Fantastic. What could it be that created that kind of system of numbers? Is it not fascinating? So you don't have anything which is mundane. It is your attention that makes something mundane or not mundane. And if you are not enjoying something, leave it. By enjoyment, I don't mean feeling indulged. I don't mean, burping and going back to sleep. By enjoying, I mean alive. You feel alive when you are doing something. And yes, your veins are throbbing. Yes, I'm nearly there. I'm nearly there. I might find an answer. When you're feeling that, then is when your actual connection is there. And that can happen in anything. Sometimes it happens in the funniest of like I was able to catch that bus in spite of I got very late from home. And I get so excited about that. It is a mundane thing, but it's a wonderful thing. So we are capable of moving out of being robots or being robotic. Robotic is what the world is trying to impose on you. Take it lightly. Don't take it so seriously. And enjoy. Yeah.
I'm a professor in College of Architecture. Most often, I have this doubt while teaching in class. I don't know if my words are conveying what I want to express, as each student understands from their own perspectives. How do I make sure that I've conveyed what I really want to convey?
So the first thing, I think, there are certain things which are factual and conveyable, which is the last thing that a teacher really wants to do. Huh? A professor is not, you don't go to his class because he can teach you to add 2 plus 2 or how to design, so and so. You really go there to him because with you, he is able to feel curious, side by side with you, curious and not knowing. And the value of the teacher is not in how clearly the teacher conveys, but in how effectively the teacher is able to convey his or her own excitement to the student. There is more that happens when you feel. We used to have, I had an engineering teacher who used to get so excited about gully traps and S-bends and so on. And it was fascinating to see him talking about the plumbing fixtures with as if it was like, life and death question. And it was wonderful. And I have never forgotten what I learned in that class because that teacher was excited about it. That must mean that there was something important there. So I think that the professor is bearing his being, his sense of life, and his sense of curiosity and openness can create more for the student than what he or she may or may not be able to explain. And sometimes we can't explain most of the things that are important. And we will just have to say, yeah, I wish I could tell you, but actually I can't, but well, I just make this line of a beat like that, but it's your choice. You go ahead. And then move. But that person should feel that something important has happened to you because of your drawing, of his drawing.
There's a question on. Yes. So how do we break free from this cycle that we keep going through of consequence and result, and in the need to sort of see something culminate in its final form, be it in design, where we're asked to show presentation sheets, or be it in any form, any kind of a profession or in life itself where we need to see immediate results. How do we break away from that?
Well, first of all, you have to take it lightly. The fact that you have a profession is only one aspect of your being. It's not the whole of you. Maybe you play tennis, or maybe you like to play football. And that also is you. And so, the sense that here is a make or break is something which I think can paralyze people. It is necessary to have a sense that, yes, this is also important in life, but I don't know. Let me see. Let me try. We do that in other things. We fall in love with somebody and we don't say, oh yes, this is forever. I know that this is going to be, and now I'll go after it and I will make sure that she marries me. No. One tries to build, at least really speaking, one should try to build a relationship. And then maybe, I don't know. And maybe somewhere I feel a little hesitant and pull back. And maybe I don't carry it through. So in the most important things in life, we have the ability to remain receptive and open. And with our profession, it should be the same. It should not be a desperation to finish something or to get the work completed or to earn the money or to get fame. Any desperation is going to create problem there. The only way to be released from all this is to say, yes, I will try. Yes, I am trying. I feel fascinated by this. I don't know what will happen. But I don't know. And that maybe is a very, very important thing for human beings to constantly remind themselves about.
Can you say a few words about Kurla Varki?
Varki. Well, he was my teacher. And we became very, very good friends. And wonderful man. Yesterday I was just talking about my various teachers to some friends of mine. And it came to me that here was a teacher who was passionate, who had great feeling for his students, who had great feeling for architecture, who was able to articulate, means explain what he believed in words that ordinary people could understand. And I think that together, all of that made him a very great teacher, but as a human being also. He was always open. You would find people going to ask him all kinds of favors at all times of day and even night. And he was open to all that. So I think as a human being, he became what he was, or he was what he was. That made him into a good architect, and that finally made him into a great teacher. But it was the human at the core.
A little bit about your Sunday reading sessions at home. How did it start? And what was the idea behind the reading sessions? And how have you been so consistent over so many years?
Well, actually it started somewhat like this. I had a sister-in-law. She was a painter. Unfortunately passed away. But she was a wonderful person. And we always got into arguments. Because she had the most wonderfully insane ideas about what was reality. Like she would say that you will feel cooler under a black umbrella because the cloth will absorb the heat. And therefore it's always better to be under a black roof than under a white roof. And she had ideas of that kind. Or she would say that if you heat water slowly, it will cool slowly. Things like that. So in order to sort of convince her about certain things, we started reading some things every Sunday. Sunday was free, and I would make bread, and she also liked bread, and then we would have tea, and I would read something to simply start a little argument, which was going to be most enjoyable. Then other people started coming. My students started coming, friends sometimes, and then it became such an enjoyable activity that it has continued. No real idea behind it.
Okay. What are some of your daily practices and tools that keep you rooted, especially in times of despair?
Yeah, well, every morning wake up fairly early, and then I must have my 3 cups of tea. Slowly. And then read something, maybe write something or talk to someone. In other times, going to the office. Not now, but then. And generally spend the morning doing that. Then have lunch. And yes, I also like to cook. So often the morning meal I cook before going off. And then after lunch is a siesta time, which started at, when I was very young, in my 30s, I used to take a 10-minute siesta. Then it increased to 20 minutes. And now it is nearly 40 minutes of siesta time that I have. And I enjoy that. Then I get up, again have tea. And I'm a new person by then. I can do other things. So these days when I'm here at Alua, I only either read or write. Once in a while, in the evening, we see something on YouTube. And then it's time to go to sleep. Nothing much more than that.
If a student of class 12 comes to you for ideas wanting to join architecture, would you recommend it? What would you recommend?
Well, it depends on who that person is. I've had cases where I felt that that person was of a different mindset, and I've said, yeah, it's fine if you want to join, but why don't you also think about so and so, or so and so, and so and so. So that's one kind of advice. But the other, I've had students come with their parents, and the parents maybe are doctors or something, very well established. And they say, oh, she wants to become an architect, but don't see any future in this. Why don't you convince her to go into, her marks are very good, she can go into medicine. And I don't say anything. And I say, well, whatever she wants to do is the best for her. So I would very quickly try and convince them to allow that person to become an architect. And in other cases, sometimes you find somebody has got tremendous ability. Sometimes you find that they have a passionate commitment to doing something good. Then you say, yes, come into our field. You will be helpful. So it depends. Depends who it is.
Okay. So this is a question that we ask everyone who joins our sessions, which is if you could recommend 5 books and 5 documentaries for all of us, especially the youth.
Okay. Books. I would say both for books and documentaries, at least one book by John Berger. Not Ways of Seeing, because that everybody reads, but book of essays by John Berger. And 2 or 3 of his interviews on YouTube are superb. Architects must see them. That's one. Then I think I would also say that there are thinkers from many fields. For example, recently I came across somebody called Ramchandra Gandhi, and there are 2 or 3 of his talks on YouTube. Fascinating person. He was a philosopher. Then I think you can read also. You should read something that describes life. So I'm from a previous generation, so we, for example, R.K. Narayan and his Malgudi Days books are superb. John Steinbeck. So novels which are really going to describing life in a very, very subtle way. They are good. Other than that, I haven't really thought about it. You should have given me the question beforehand. But let's see. Well, I think Richard Sennett is a social scientist, but also an urbanist. And his book, The Craftsman, his book Together, and his recent book, most recent book, he's written maybe 20, 30 books. Oh yes, so there's one more I would recommend. There's a guy called Terry Eagleton. He's a literary critic, and he has written a small book in the series A Short Introduction to. So it's a book called A Short Introduction to the Meaning of Life. And it's hilarious. So you must read that. It's very good. Many of the ideas that I've been talking about are related to Eagleton's thought. Also, Ivan Illich. Illich's Deschooling Society is something which every student should read, that they can go and fight the faculty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Documentaries?
Documentaries? Documentaries. Yes, I talked about John Berger's interviews.
Okay.
Then I also talked about Ramchandra Gandhi's talks.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, but I'll let me think. Yes, you should see something of David Harvey. David Harvey is an economist or a political scientist, and he's written on capitalism, and he's written on what's happening in our societies. David Harvey is one. So there are, again, all his talks are on YouTube, wonderful talks. So not documentaries, but yeah, I think that's what I would recommend.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So just to
Right.
kind of wind down the session, we have Akshaya, who is also a student of architecture, and she, I think she has been a part of some of the sessions with you, and she has a few words to say. So I'm just going to put her on.
Thank you so much, sir. It's always a great pleasure listening to you talk, and thank you so much for giving us so many pointers today. And I'm here to just share you a small experience that I had with you. I still remember the first day when me and my dad stepped into your office to meet you, and I'm still grateful to meet you, meet such a humble and wonderful human being you are, and thank you so much for that, sir. And to me, before coming to Ahmedabad or having an interaction with you, architecture has always been a cover up or something that I take in my hand or carrying with me. But after talking to you or listening to you interact, it has shown me that architecture is not just something that you have, it's who you are, how you live. And it has shown me you as your lifestyle has shown me that architecture is how you live, how you engage with your surrounding, how you talk with the person, how you socialize. And that's something that I learned a lot, even from your reading sessions or even making a jam and chatting with your family members and friends. That's something that I understood architecture can expand itself and take it not just building buildings and interacting and being together. Thank you so much, sir. I just want to take this platform and thank you for that, giving me and keeping yourself open to lead me in your life. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, sir.
Okay.
So this is something that we'd like to tell all the participants during every session, which is to definitely write about the session on social media. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, and write it immediately, soon after the session, because that's when it's still fresh in your minds. And also that we apologize, we weren't able to take all the questions, but for the participants and to you, sir, thank you so much. It was a very enlightening session.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it.